Welcome back to another edition of the podcast. Of course, tonight I'm joined by Joe. Please remember to check out our sponsors in the link in the description. Cards accepted. You get 50% off your order, no contracts or monthly fees. So thank you to them for sponsoring the channel. But tonight I brought Joe on to discuss something very important. We're 7 games into the National League season now. There's some slight patterns you can start to have a feel for how sides are going to perform this season. Of course, yes, it's very early, but we've already had 2 managers who've left the building, and we've had one manager that's come in for the moment. But before we get on to all of that and discuss each team, Joe, firstly, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Lots of football underway. We're a good way into the season now. Obviously, still early days, but lots going on. Quite busy, but lots of football to enjoy.
Yeah, there certainly is. And I think when we always say at the start of every season, surely it can't get any better than last season. Of course, there's still some high expectations to hit last season's standards, especially at the top. But the unpredictability in this division in the National League, oh man, it's too extreme, isn't it? You wouldn't have thought how it would have begun. Southend, of course, at the bottom. Some might have predicted that, but the way they've actually started, the character, we'll come on to them. The likes of York and Oldham struggling. And to see sides like Solihull and Barnet doing exceptionally well so far this season, it's very, very unexpected, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of teams that have certainly surpassed our expectations at this stage. And certainly some teams that perhaps not hit the heights that we would have expected them to. But that's why we love the National League, because it's so unpredictable, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. So I think how we're going to do tonight's interview for those who are watching and for you, Joe, is we're going to look at every single club, see what the problems may be, what they need to improve, but also look at the positives. Of course, as we get towards the top of the table, it's going to be more on the positives than the negatives. But the first club that we're going to come on to, and it is 24th place at the moment, 7 games in. Now, this is quite harsh because it's probably one of those sides that's down there and they're at bottom at the moment, but they don't belong there. The way that they've started the season, the characters from the players, it's a very awkward situation to really be talking about in a certain aspect because of how well they've performed so far. But of course, that's Southend United, currently sat on 2 points. They've lost 3 games, but they've actually won 4. The reason that they're, of course, on 2 points, as most of you will be aware, is because of the minus 10-point deduction, I believe. So to be on positive points after 7 games, I think says a lot about the squad and the togetherness, and I think the ability to a certain extent as well in the squad. What's your take on Southend?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be really, really impressed by what they've done there. They continue to, whatever setback they get, they seem to bounce back really well. Obviously, they had that points deduction, but they haven't let that stop them. 4 good wins out of 7. And ordinarily, that would be a really, really good return. But obviously, because of the points deduction, they are where they are. But Kevin Mayer would be really, really pleased. Again, very small squad. He's having to rely on, only about 15, 16 players there every week. So, I'm really, really impressed. And I think Southend fans, all they want is for their team to go out and give it their all. And they are doing that.
Now, I'm going to ask you a bit of a difficult question now on Southend United. Do you see them staying up this season? Of course, there's talks about them not even ending the season and more point deductions. But do you think they have that ability to survive the National League this season?
They certainly have the ability to. I certainly think when I look at their squad, even though they haven't got perhaps the 20, 25 players that other teams have got, and they've got a much smaller squad, I would certainly say their quality is still there in terms of their main 11. It's whether or not that gets really stretched at the end of the season. When we get into the back end of the season, that the demands on those players can be tough. But I think in terms of their 11, is really good. I would imagine at some point this season they will be allowed to add a couple of players. Given what John Still and Kevin Mayer have done so far there, I would imagine they'll add quality as well. So, I certainly think they can. The one thing they have been able to show so far is they can win games of football, which a couple of teams in this league already have shown they haven't been able to do. So, I certainly think they can.
Yeah, there's clearly a lot of character in that squad. Of course, they had that might on the opening day, winning the opening game against an Oldham side who have been one of the favourites. We'll come on to them shortly. But then to back it up as well with a 2-0 win away at Dagenham, then having a bit of a difficult patch. But then they had another point deduction. And you're thinking, right, they've lost 2 games on the bounce now. They've had a -10 point deduction. This is where it's going to start going downhill now. We had 2 good games at the start, but then to play Eastleigh on a Friday night, who, yes, hadn't had the best of starts, but there's still a lot of quality in that squad. And to defeat them after just hearing that you've got a -10 point deduction after all that work you've put in, that says a lot, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think, one thing that has been really evident so far is the character and the togetherness that, Kevin Mayer has built there. Obviously, there's been a lot of things for them to have to go through. But one thing they seem to keep showing is that character, that togetherness, and their mentality to keep winning games. And yeah, I think that will go a long way, as it's shown so far.
Yeah, it certainly will. Just finally on then, Southend, before we move on to the next club, did you expect them to have this good of a start this season after what you've heard, after all the media and the drama there at the moment? Did you expect them to have quite a decent start, which they've had?
I think they would have probably, I think if you'd have asked Kevin Mayer and those, in his coaching staff and the players, I think they would have perhaps foreseen the fact that they would have a points deduction at this stage. So I think they themselves would have wanted to start really strongly and try and, get some points on the board so that if they did get the points deduction, they wouldn't be too badly off at this stage. And yeah, I mean, as I say, they've got a really good 11. So I'm not surprised that they've started well, and they've had some good home games as well, which good support getting behind them, and they're a really, really difficult team to beat at home.
The next club then, what we're going to talk about, 23rd, and this is a bit more on a negative note at the moment. Of course, they've just appointed a new manager, which we'll come on to shortly. Of course, that's York City. A lot of noise and exposure around the club in pre-season with a new takeover in Matt Ugler. Of course, the calibre of players on paper look like players that should be playing in the Football League or should be at least at the higher end. But it's been a very slow start for York City, and I think it's been quite highly underwhelming for them so far this season. I believe they're the only side in the division not to have won a game yet. 23rd, they're sitting on 3 points at the moment. Firstly, before we come on to the football side of things, what impressions do you get about Matt Ugler as a chairman?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can form an opinion more so than others, only because I have seen, what he did last year at Yeovil, given the fact I'm quite close there in terms of going to see some games and get behind the scenes there. So I can form an opinion. I think you have to take him on face value in that he has put a lot of money in. There's no doubt about that. He put money in. He wants to win. He's passionate. He wants to win. He wants to create a winning football club. Certainly, there's a couple of things that he's done so far which I am critical of, and I think York fans will agree for the good that he's done in terms of building a really good squad and backing the manager, etc. There is a couple of times where he perhaps just needs to not tread on the line and not say something to upset people. And I think if he didn't do that, then they'd allow the good that he does to shine through, because he has built a really good squad there. Even though they have started poorly, they have got a good set of players, and I think that's why most people backed them to be up in the top half. So yeah, I think the intentions are right, but perhaps the way that he goes about things is a little bit wrong at times. But he's learning. So
I know you mentioned there that they have got a good squad and it's probably top half, but where do you think on paper that 11? Because I'm not totally convinced that the balance of the team going forward, I feel that they're lacking a lot in areas as well. And the likes of Howe and Corner, of course, it's early, probably haven't lived up to those expectations of being two of the best centre-halves in the league. Where do you think that squad should be performing?
Well, certainly on paper, they should be at least top half. I know that's not a given anyway, because the National League is a tough league, but given the quality that they've brought in, Deepo Akinyemi up front, I know he had some Football League offers. The fact that he's turned those down to join York shows the quality of the player that they've got there. And you mentioned Tyler Cordner, obviously did really well. So it should be top half, and they should be challenging for the top 7. I think most York fans would have expected that, given the investment that they've put in. I think mainly one of the reasons why they perhaps have struggled so far is because, yes, they have a good squad and some good players, but they haven't found a settled 11. For a team that's got 30 plus players already on the books, it seems a little bit baffling to say that they are perhaps short in some areas. Yeah. We talked about Southend. They've got less than half of their numbers of players. So I think one of the problems is they've perhaps got too many players and they don't know their strongest 11. And I think that's one thing that Neil Lardley will do. Obviously, we'll come on to him, obviously appointed today. I think that's one thing he will do in terms of find out what is his best 11 and perhaps cut a fair few from that squad away from the first team. And have a more settled side, because there is quality in it.
Yeah, of course, Michael Morton. Now, he's a manager that I have quite a lot of respect for from last season. He kept them in the division, and I do think that York side last season was a very poor side overall. This season he's struggled. What do you put that down to?
Well, a number of things. I think the main one being, like I said, because they've got so many players, they don't know their best team. Whereas, for example, a Southend, they come into the season, they know their team inside out because they haven't got anyone else to pick. York have got so many players that I think the first 7 games has been quite a bit of chopping and changing, trying different players out, slightly different formations. And once they find a settled team and an 11, then I'm sure they will do well. But I think that's one of the challenges that they have had, given that they've brought in so many players. Mike Morton, he picks an 11, he picks 5 subs, he's still got another 10 players that don't even make the squad on a match day. And for someone as inexperienced as him, just starting out as a manager, it can be tough having to tell 10 players every week, you're not making the squad. So, yeah, I think that's the main problem is, too many players. And whilst they do have quality, they perhaps then also have 5 or 6 that are nowhere near the level. And I think that's the problem, knowing when to put certain players in.
So Neil Ardley then has come in. It's been appointed, as we're recording this, probably a couple of hours ago now. I know Darren Moore was the favourite. Then it was him all along. I think the majority of us thought it would be Neil Ardley who'd come in. He's, of course, been previously at Solihull Moors, a well-drilled Solihull side, I have to say, in that first season, I think second season, maybe the season they got into the playoffs and came up short against Grimsby. Of course, had a difficult second season there. And then we go back to his time at Notts County. I think good, effective football probably was the right decision for him to leave there. But now he's coming into York. And I think he's put in a different situation here compared to when he was at Solihull and when he was at Notts County, because there's just been a recent takeover. He's a well-known manager at this level. What impressions do you get at him? And then can you see him being that man that fires York into the playoffs this season and maybe in the future be that man when they hope, which is their ambition to get in the Football League, be the manager that does that for them?
Yeah, I think, we know what Neil Ardley's about. As you said there, he puts together well-drilled teams. And I think it's perhaps more of a John Askey type, because the squad that York have is good. They've got some good players in it. And they perhaps just have to be a little bit more well-drilled to allow that quality to shine through. That's what I expect Neil Ardley will do. I expect he'll get the team well-drilled, organised, and then allow their quality players to do what they do best. I think they have to be mindful of the fact that given their poor start, they perhaps can lower expectation. Obviously, they will still have ambition to get in the playoffs, but if they do fall short this season, given his record of having teams in and around the playoffs, that stick by him. But I'm sure if they continue to back Neil Ardley the way that they've been backing Mike Morton in terms of bringing in players and give him time to implement his ideas, I'm sure Neil Ardley will have York in and around the playoffs and challenging for promotion. So whether it happens this year or whether they need to wait for next year is the big question. But certainly I imagine long term he'll have them challenging up near the top.
Of course, sides that are just above them, we've got Dorking Wanderers, who are the final side. Well, then you've got Fylde and Kidderminster, two newly promoted sides. Fylde, I think, maybe a bit of a surprise because a lot of people have had quite high expectations for them this season because I think it might be a bit unknown to a lot of supporters, but they do actually have quite a lot of money behind them, which has been shown with the likes of Golden Mateo, who's come into the side. But then you've also got Kidderminster just outside of the relegation zone at the moment. First, then Dorking, Fylde and Kidderminster. What's your overview of their starts to the season?
Yeah, well, I'll start with Dorking. Dorking, I put a tweet out a couple of weeks ago actually and said I was a little bit concerned, only a tad, because I like Mark White. I think he's a really good manager. I think he's really honest and talks really well, and he has got a good squad there. And I think the continuity, we looked at York and the fact they've brought in so many players, the fact that Dorking have kept their team fairly settled from last year will help. But Tony Craig came in at the back end of last season, obviously a really good defender. They signed him permanently in the summer. We all assumed that would make them difficult to beat and score against. But that's not been the case so far. 14 goals against, -7 goal difference already. And for what I expected of Dorking coming into the season, in that they'd perhaps be a little bit more well-drilled and difficult to play against, they haven't been. So that's why I think I'd be perhaps a little concerned.
Do you not see them getting on? Because I know I spoke to Mark White, and I think we probably both admire him for what he's done, and I think the majority of non-league people who take a specific interest in the league know about this man and have a lot of respect for him because of what he's done. But do you think? I know when I spoke to him, he said top 3 finish, and then he also said playoff chasers. So you don't really know where you're at, but with him at the moment, but. Where do you see Dorking? Do you see them having any major improvement from last season, or do you think it's going to be a similar kind of season where we know they're going to be down there?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mark perhaps will sometimes say some things which perhaps just said to get a response. I think if you ask Dorking fans, they will be just happy to stay up again. I think sometimes we underestimate just how difficult it is to actually stay in the National League. Mm-hmm. We've just seen 2 really, really established Football League clubs go out of the National League in Yeovil and Torquay.
To be honest, Torquay,
and Scunthorpe. So, for the fact that I would look at them and say that they've just got to try and finish outside of the bottom 4. Beyond that, then they can build once they've had 2 or 3 years in the division. Talking about top 3, I know Mark's an ambitious guy, but I would imagine that what he may say to us is perhaps a bit more ambitious than what he would say in that changing room. Obviously, that he will say that he just wants them to be competitive and stay in the league. For him, it's just about staying at this level. And I think if you ask Dorking fans, they'd be happy with that. It's to look at going into the top 3 or 4. As Mark said, in their first or second season at this level is a little bit ahead of themselves before they can run. So, I'd be looking just to stay up.
So Fylde and Kidderminster then. Fylde were a side for me that I watched them against Hartlepool and I did think they were a very poor side. But when I've looked at the highlights, they've got some quality players in that side, some individuals there that I think could be in the future Football League players, the likes of Horton and probably Golden Mateo, if he can prove himself at this level on a consistent basis, which I think he's got a massive opportunity there to do that at Fylde. But Fylde and Kidderminster then, what's your thoughts on them so far?
I think they're kind of polar opposites of each other, to be honest. I mean, you've got an AFC Fylde team that have come up, they've really entertained, scored a lot of goals. And as you said, lots of quality. Horton being the main one, obviously a couple of really good goals so far. The one against Wealdstone really catching the eye. And they have looked good going forward, defensively they look shambolic. And I would imagine that as with time they will improve, because they've got some good defenders there. But it's perhaps just trying to tailor their system as Dorking did last year. Just trying to find that balance. And then you've got Kidderminster, who've perhaps not been as good going forward. Only scored 3 goals. I think they've actually scored the lowest number of goals in the whole league going forward. But equally, as I probably expected from them, they're a bit more difficult to break down. They've got lots of experience at the back. Christian Pearce, Nathaniel Knight Percival, players like that at the back who have been there and done it. So, yeah, 2 very contrasting teams. And I think there are another 2 more teams that will be looking just to stay up. I know longer term, AFC Fylde will be looking to challenge towards the playoffs. And I think given the quality in their squad and, a good manager and a good director of football there in Chris Beach, they'll want to. But I think first and foremost, first season back in the National League, I'd personally just be looking to stay above the dotted line.
So, of course, then we've got the likes of Boreham, Oldham, Oxford, before we come on to Aldershot. But before we go on to Oldham, because I think there's a lot to talk about with them, we'll start things off with Boreham then. I think they've probably had a slow start. I wouldn't say it's any major concern for them at the moment. I think, like I said, it's very hard to tell at the moment. And they have had a tough start. But, of course, they haven't actually won a match. They've actually only won 1 match this season. That was against Halifax on the game week 2. Do you have any concerns with them so far, or do you think they're going to come good?
I think they'll probably come good. I don't know whether or not they'll get in the playoffs, as they usually seem to do. But, we know what Luke Garrard's about. He puts together teams that are usually quite difficult to play against, usually quite well drilled. And I imagine that they'll be more than happy come the end. I think it's just about trying to find that balance going forward. Obviously brought in Kwesi Appiah. He's played a lot up front for them so far. And it's just trying to find that balance in front of goal, because that they're usually, unless they're playing Oxford City, who we'll come on to, they're usually quite well drilled and difficult to score against. And I don't see them having any problems come the end.
So we've got Oldham then, and their side that I think, like York, have been quite underwhelming. They've only had 1 win this season so far, and that actually came against Aldershot. But what concerns me so far is they've had, I think, a start that's been quite good for them, because they've had a mixture of some good sides, to test them and see where they're at. But also, they've had some winnable games on paper, or what we would say the start of the season. Of course, losing to Southend away from home is just the worst start possible, especially in that fashion. And then to back up with a win against Aldershot, you're starting to think maybe it was just that first game of the season. And, we found a striker now in Norwood, which is something that maybe they were missing, as well as the players that they had last season. But then from that to lose to Halifax at home, get I think quite a lucky draw at Chesterfield away, draw at the likes of Boreham, and then to lose to Solihull, and then to concede in the last minute to Gateshead. There's clearly a lot of concerns there about, I think, the mentality of this Oldham side. And of course, we've seen a lot of supporters, chanting Unsworth out at the moment. And him by the supporters, maybe not the owner, as we've seen, is under a lot of pressure. And, it is quite nasty, some of the abuse that he's getting. But I don't think this is a position that Oldham fans would want to be in at this point in the season. Of course, it is early.
No, and I think if you'd have asked Oldham fans at the start whether or not they'd have started like this, I don't think anyone would have believed you. Really good squad, invested really well. Like they said, brought in James Norwood. Obviously, lots of good players they've brought in this summer, but he'd be the pick of those. There is a cause for concern. With that much quality. There is a lot of pressure. There's managers in this league that would love to have that sort of money to spend. And I think there is cause for concern. I think the one thing that really does worry me is the fact that, they've brought in some really good players, but they don't seem to be playing a system to get the best out of them. I think if you ask Oldham fans, every Oldham fan will tell you their best formation is 3 at the back. Sean Hobson they brought in was one of the best centre halves in the league last year. Southend played in the back three. They brought in James Norwood, who was at Barnsley last year, that played it in a front two, in a three at the back system, and yet he continues to play with a four. So for me, they've brought in lots of quality, but don't seem to be playing a system to get the best out of them. Maybe it requires a manager to come in and do that, a new manager. But
are you ones within it then, or how do you think, from what you see, do you think he needs to go? To be honest, if you were the owner, would you look at someone else?
Personally, I would say no. And the only reason I'd say that is I was quite impressed at the back end of last season. I watched them at Yeovil and they play really, really well. I know obviously this is a new season and they haven't started well. But, Frank Rothwell is obviously in charge upstairs now at Oldham. He's a smart businessman. And if he didn't think David Unsworth was good enough, then he wouldn't have backed him in the summer. So he clearly thinks he's a good manager. I'd give him a little bit more time. I mean, we're only 7 games in, and York have started bad, and Oldham as well, and they've both spent a lot of money. But it's only 7 games, and they can easily turn it around with the squads that they've got. They can certainly go and win, 5-6 games on the bounce. So,
how many games would you give him?
That's a difficult question. I think Oldham fans will still want to try and get promoted this season. So the question you've got to ask is, how long do they leave it before they're potentially too far away from the likes of Barnet and Chesterfield to be able to catch them? I don't think they're going to win the league, even if they pick up a little bit. So I think they've got enough to get into the playoffs. It's just about whether or not they allow it a lot of time. I'd give them another 5-6 games, see what happens. And if, a quarter of the way through the season, that would be 5 or 6 more games. If they aren't in and around it and the playoffs come then perhaps I'd change.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. I know we looked at the Stockport, and that was the best thing that happened to him, wasn't it, a couple of seasons ago when they had that change from, I believe it was Rusk, wasn't it, to Challinor, and they never looked back since then, have they? And it was a bit of a similar situation with the amount of money that they'd spent that summer as well, and it clearly wasn't working. And I believe they gave him about 10 games. It might have been this time, kind of time of the season. Bit of a contrast then in the next team we're talking about, a newly promoted side. A lot of sides that a lot of people have written off, including myself. But for now, they are proving us wrong. If they're still proving us wrong come Christmas time, we'll have to wait and see. Oxford City, that is, currently sitting 17th in the league. 1 win, which was, of course, against Bournemouth, putting 4 past Bournemouth, which says a lot. 3 draws. And, of course, they've had 3 defeats. But I think it's worth mentioning is that they're actually unbeaten in 4 at the moment. Of course, they got a point against Solihull Moors away from home, who've been a very tough side this season. They're up there, beating the likes of Bournemouth, getting a point against Halifax. They've been very well organised, I think, this season. And they're very good going forward as well. And they've got the likes of Josh Parker, who is producing the majority of the goals for them. If that gets found out in the upcoming weeks, we don't know. I'd expect it to happen. And I do expect Oxford City to have a patch in the season when they really do struggle. But what's going to be interesting is to see if they can react to that. What do you get from Oxford City at the moment? Do you think they're a side that have the capabilities to survive this season from what you've seen?
Yes, I think they can. At the start of the season, I thought they would go down. I predicted them to go down purely because they're perhaps not the full-time outfit of other teams. I didn't think they had a particularly big squad, but that's not to say that I like them as a team. I think Ross Jenkins is a really, really good manager, and they'd be one of my teams at the start so far in the National League. It was a difficult start for them, obviously shipping all those goals at Aldershot, but since then they've looked good. Zach McEachran's back now, and he's got back in the goals. As you say, 4 games unbeaten. They're showing a bit more character, and I think for a team that are new to the level, they're perhaps just trying to bide their time and adjust to a new league, because it is a step up, from the National League South. I think whereas you've got a team like Fylde or Ebbsfleet that obviously we'll come on to, that have players that have all played at the level before, Oxford City's team is fairly untested at this level. It's all about learning at the moment. But yeah, I've been really impressed with them, and I think that squad will be tested because they got one of the smallest squads in the league. I think only Southend have got a smaller squad. It'll be tested, but certainly the signs so far are really good.
Do you think they will stay up then this season?
Difficult. If I had to guess or make a prediction now, I would still say yes, only because I think, having seen it last year, it's a tough league, especially in the winter months. Your squad gets tested, you get a lot of injuries, and you really need a good backup squad. And that's where I think a team like York or an Oldham will be fine, because they've got a really big squad to be able to manage that, whereas Oxford City haven't got that. I certainly, if they get one or two injuries in their squad, then they're going to struggle. I would still favour them to go down. However, we could be sitting here in 5-6 games time and they continue their run and continue to show improvement. And I wouldn't bet against Ross Jenkins. I know I've just done that exact thing and say they'll go down, but he's a really good coach, Ross Jenkins. And I think whilst everybody will expect them to go down, he'll be eager to make sure that doesn't happen. And I wouldn't put it past him.
So we've got the middle patch now as sides. We'll get through these very quickly. A bit of a mix. There's probably two sides, maybe three at a push that wouldn't be particularly happy with their start, and two sides that I think would be. Aldershot, of course, in 16th. Eastleigh, 15th, of course, let their manager go now after, I wouldn't say an awful start, but it wasn't the best of starts, and they weren't playing the best of football with Lee Bradbury at the helm. Of course, he's been let go. Then you've got Wealdstone, who a lot of people have written off this season and have proved us wrong in the early stages of the season. Then you've got Bromley, who've had a bit of a difficult start, but have picked up in the last two games. And then you've got Gateshead, who I think have had a brilliant start themselves as well, and have really built from that FA Trophy run that they had last season. From those five sides, then, what are your thoughts on those five so far?
Yeah, well, Aldershot. I'll start with Aldershot. Obviously, we talked about that big win against Oxford City on the opening day, and I've been really impressed with Aldershot. It has to be said. I think they've had a tough start, not an easy games by any stretch. They've had Chesterfield, and they obviously had the game away against Eastleigh, where they ended up with a striker or two strikers in goal. So they've not had the easiest of starts, but I've been really impressed with them, and I think we've come to expect from Aldershot that even when they play the tough teams like a Chesterfield, they give it a real good go. They lose 4-3, and that's what I expect from a Tommy Widrington side. They'll give it a go. They've got some real quality in their side. I think Josh Stokes has been brilliant so far for them. A couple of goals and assists, and Laurent Tolhage is Aldershot fans thought he was a really good striker, and he wasn't a too bad goalkeeper either. He's been. They've been good so far, and they've adjusted well without Tyler Cordner so far. I think Eastleigh, obviously, another team that's invested really well and struggled. I did have my concerns stylistically under Bradbury. I thought they were a little bit too predictable, and for a team with so much quality in it, they were a bit direct, and I think Eastleigh fans would share that concern so far, in that they haven't been the most eye-catching of sides. But given the quality that they've got, you'd imagine they'll be fine come the end. Wealdstone is a tough one. Obviously, I know you have Paul on a lot, and I speak to Paul regularly. And I think one of the things I said in my pre-season preview is that for a team like this, Wealdstone always seem to have a drop-off, because they're part-time. They always seem to struggle near the back end of the season, where your squad's tested and your fitness in particular is tested. And I said it was really important for them to have a good start, because they always seem to drop off. And it was only last year, because of a good start, that they actually probably stayed up. So I think for 7 games and 8 points. I think they'll be slightly disappointed, especially to lose their last 3. And I think it is about just trying to find that balance at the top end of the pitch for them. Bromley, I've been really impressed with. I think it's another team trying to adjust. Obviously, lost a lot of players in the summer. Kellen Fisher, Omar Shimney, Reece Charles Cook, all moving on, and it was trying to find a new crop of youngsters to come in, and they've done that. Ben Crowhouse in the midfield's done really well so far. He's improving, and so's their form. 5 unbeaten now, 2 straight wins, and Andy Woodman seems to be adding to that side really, really well. A couple of loan additions today. I see one from Preston North End and 2 yesterday from Arsenal. So they seem to be getting better, and you'd expect that with a young team. And then Gateshead, obviously ended the season really, really well, and a team that I expected to be in and around it. And they did start really well, and Stephen Wean's been impressive for them. Really good at the top end of the pitch, couple of goals. But they'll be disappointed. I think that's 3 unbeaten, 3 without a win now in the league. But the character that they've shown to come back against Chesterfield to get a draw as well. So I think mid-table start for them, not too bad. And I've been quite impressed with them as well.
Fair enough. Yeah, Gates, they're a side for me. I know a lot of people have seen them as a dark horse this season and a side that can really push on. Dagenham and Maidenhead then. 2 sides I don't think many people have had many expectations for this season. Maidenhead, it's always the first aim every season is to survive. I know we had a conversation at Wembley when we met up, and you said that, I don't know if you actually predicted them to go down in the end, but you were saying every season they're getting closer and closer to the drop. And you said this could be the season where they do finally drop down. It's very early and a lot does change. I will say that. And I know I predicted Maynard to go down, and I'm standing by that at the moment, even with what I've seen. Dagenham, though, a side that a lot of people, I think, have probably thought they might struggle this season with the players, of course, Inie Young now. Unfortunate for them, and unfortunate for him as well, out with a serious injury. The amount of players that they lost last season and throughout last season. But they've had a decent start so far, I would say, for them. Dagenham and Maidenhead then as a whole, what do you see from those 2 sides so far?
Yeah, well, Dagenham, obviously not the greatest of starts in terms of first couple of games. Quite a few players in during the summer. And, another team that we've talked about on this list that perhaps just trying to find their best 11. But it would appear that Ben Strevens has been able to find that. And obviously 3 wins in a row now for them. They'll be really pleased with that. And even though Inie Young is obviously out injured, they seem to adapt really well. I think Charlie Kendall's come in, done really well at the top end of the pitch. They've got that balance right in the midfield now. Frank Vincent and Josh Reese, particular, impressing for them. And they look to have found a little bit more balance about their play. Certainly keeping more clean sheets, looking harder to score against. And as for Maidenhead, I mean, everybody expects Maidenhead to be down there at the bottom end of the season. But Alan Devonshire keeps doing what he does. They're another team that probably need to start well, and they have done. 4 without a defeat now in the league.
They've scored 1 goal in that 4 as well. 3 0-0 draws on the bounce, and a 1-0 win against Dagenham.
Yeah, and that's what they're really good at. And they've brought in some players like Craig Ross, Kevin Locko, Lewis Kinsella, that are all good players for the level, played at this level before, and they know what the league's about. And tough team to play against. It takes a good side to score against them. And as you say, 4 clean sheets. That's the Devonshire way. And having lost Emil Aqua in the summer, there was perhaps concerns that they may struggle to replace his goals, but so often teams look at it and think, well, we have to replace his goals and score loads, but actually some teams just improve at the back. And Maidenhead have done that, and they brought in a couple of strikers as well. So if they can continue grinding out results as they usually do, then they should be okay.
I think Maidenhead have to be the most common banana skin for the majority of teams in this division, don't they? No one likes to play them. Usually they're the underdogs in every game, but they actually thrive off that, don't they? But from 10th to 16th, then the sides that we've recently spoke about, do you see any of those sides going down, or do you see any of those sides getting in the playoffs this season?
I would imagine that Maidenhead and Aldershot will probably be in and around the relegation come the end. I don't think they will. I think they'll both comfortably stay up. And I think they'll both be above the dotted line. But of those teams, you'd imagine the likes of Oldham, Boreham, York will improve. So if there's any teams that are going to go down slightly in the table, then you'd imagine it'd be them and Wealdstone as well. I think they're the one team. I'm a big fan of Stuart Maynard, but I think it's going to be tough for them. Not the biggest of squads, and as we say, part-time, that fitness will be tested. I think Gateshead are probably a good bet for being in and around the playoffs. I think we haven't really seen the best of them yet because they've brought in a lot of players in the summer. And then you'd have to say Eastleigh as well. I mean, I think that all depends on who they bring as their manager. If they bring in a really good manager, then you'd say, yeah, certainly there's the quality there for them to go and challenge. So I think that's all dependent on who they bring in. And I wouldn't discount Bromley either. I think Andy Woodman's a really good manager, does really well on a fairly low budget.
Do you have any managers in mind that you'd like to see it come in as Eastleigh to get the best out of them? I know it's hard.
Well, I did have Neil Ardley down for our piece, which was going to be up tomorrow. So we had to scrap that as to who they go for. Off the top of my head, I haven't got a name, but you'd imagine it would be someone with experience. They can't afford to go with a manager that's just trying his hand out, because if they go for someone like that, then they might as well have just stuck with Lee Bradbury. So they've got to bring in someone with experience, but especially given the pressure on them, they've got to go in and get someone in that's going to thrive on that pressure. Maybe, wouldn't it be just apt that they go and get someone like a John Askey?
Yeah.
Not a John Askey. No, name's gone.
Come out your head. I would think. Yeah. I know this is a bit of a long shot, because it was actually rumoured with the York with the York job, and I thought that'd actually be a decent fit and a long project. And I remember saying, I was speaking to a York fan, I said it'll likely be Neil Ardley who will come in. But if I was the owner and if I could, I would have brought in the Cowley brothers, because I think you can have a long project there with those two. We saw what they did at Lincoln, quite liked at Portsmouth as well before they were let go. Is that something that do you think is realistic for Eastleigh to pull in?
Yeah. I mean, we don't know how much of a budget they've got in terms of being able to go and get a manager in. I would imagine they've got a fairly good budget to be able to go and get someone attractive that can take them forward long term. And as you said, if they do go and get someone in like that, then the Cowley brothers would be perfect. They've won the league before with Lincoln. They know how to get out of the league, and a lot of the players that they've brought in the summer, they would have either managed before or known from playing against them in the Football League. So yeah, I think that's a good shout.
Of course, we've then got Altrincham, Rochdale and Woking. I think Altrincham and Rochdale, they're two sides that have surprised me, because usually what we say is when sides come down into this division, especially for the first time in their entire history, they have a slow start. Of course, Rochdale, it has been bang mid-table kind of a start, of course, although they are just outside of the playoffs. They've won 3, they've drawn 1 and they've lost 3. Of course, they've just lost to Halifax at home, which I think is quite a poor result from them. But they've clearly got some quality players there with a lot of potential as well. Of course, we're doing this the wrong way around here, but I think it's right that we speak about Rochdale first. What have you got from them so far?
Yeah, well, I have to say, that one team that has really impressed me so far is Rochdale. It's always a difficult one when you come down from the Football League. We've seen so many teams struggle, Southend, Scunthorpe, and we've just lost, as you say, 3 ex-Football League sides out of the National League.
I think it is actually 4, isn't it? Maidstone were Football League side as well, I believe.
Okay, well, so 4 sides, and Rochdale would have come down slightly hesitant, slightly fearful that they could be near the bottom, but I can't put my finger on why or how they've been able to do it so far. But Jim McNulty's got them playing some lovely stuff. I think they've got a really good blend of youth and experience. Particularly going forward, I've been really impressed. Cairo Mitchell has really caught the eye so far, and obviously Tyrese Sinclair. He's been probably their best player. Obviously, we'd have spoken about him last year with Altrincham. Really impressive, and they've been really good so far. I think they'll be perhaps thinking that they've done better than they would have expected at this stage, just as to how well they've been able to adapt to the National League. They've done really well, and to be 8th and a point off the playoffs after 7 games is a really good start.
I do. Although we beat them, I was actually quite impressed with Rochdale. I thought they've got players there that are capable of getting them into the playoffs. Gilmore looked a different player. Looked like he's bulked up and was a lot more positive going forward. They've got a few strikers there. It's a bit unfortunate for them that Rodney's gone out injured now. But, there's a good squad there. And I think they seem like a solid side who play well as a team with a good balance. And I do think that they're going to be in and around the playoffs come the end of the season. But a side just below them, of course, on goal difference, that is Altrincham. Now, they're a side that a lot of people did have as the dark horse this season. I felt I put them a bit low. But their pulling power has been something that's impressed me as well. The players that they've been able to attract, especially this season, as well as the form on the field. Of course, they've had a brilliant start. They've only actually had 1 defeat this season. That was to Bromley at home. But then they go and bring in Ollie Crankshaw from Stockport, who was a standout when the season they got promoted from this division. What's your thoughts been on Altrincham so far? Because they've played some exceptional football and attractive football.
Yeah, I think Altrincham are a side that you always expect that. They'll always score goals. They'll always be a good watch. But I think they're also a side that concede a fair few. And I think that's been perhaps their problem so far, that undoubted quality going forward. I mean, they got one of the best attacking players in the division in Chris Clark. Mm-hmm. And as you say, they've brought in Ollie Crankshaw from Stockport. Obviously got Dior Angus that's won the league before with Barrow. So they've got good quality. But I think they just need a little bit more balance to refine their game. And if they can do that, then they've absolutely got the attacking quality to hurt teams, as they have this season. Beat Chesterfield 2-1. So, as expected from Altrincham, I think always going to be good going forward, always going to be a little bit shaky at the back. But either way, difficult side to play against and should be there or thereabouts as one of the darker horses.
I'd expect that. I just think, what's it going to be like when they have those injuries? And I think they've kind of noticed that already, and they've already got that warning sign in their head, I believe, in Phil Parkinson's head and the recruitment side of things, because they've already added quality when really, from what I've seen, they didn't really need any more quality going forward. But we know when injuries start to kick in, they will do. But another side then, Woking, I think what they've been known from the last couple of seasons is they're going to be up there with the money that they've spent, the squad, and they're just inside the playoffs at the moment after a bit of a difficult start that they have turned it around in recent weeks. Unbeaten in 3 now. What's your take being on them?
A difficult. I say a difficult start. They haven't perhaps been at their best, but they find themselves in the playoffs. And again, another team. Darren Sowell, really good manager, and his sides usually are able to grind out points. I think they've struggled so far in terms of they haven't found the right system for their players so far from the continuity that we saw last year. They've perhaps adapted it slightly. They've played virtually the whole season so far without a midfield. They've had a lot of injuries in there. Rowan Ince, I think, hasn't even played so far, and they've missed some key bodies in there. But yeah, as you'd expect from Darren Sarr, only 1 defeat in 5. They find a way by hook or by crook to get results, and especially to go to Gateshead, concede to go 1-0 down. You thought, here we go, and they managed to turn it around, get a 3-1 win, and I back them to be in and around the top 3. I think I actually put them 3rd in my predictions this season, and I expect them to be there or thereabouts come the end.
2 sides then above them, 2 sides that I think nobody expected to be up there at this stage of the season. Halifax, which of course is my team. There's been a lot of positives we can take, a lot of negatives as well. And well, maybe not negatives, but ways we can improve. And then you've got Ebbsfleet, who I think are some force. A side that I'm keeping a close eye on this season, and a side that I think a lot of people may drop off, but I think they're a very, very well drilled side. The manager they've got, I know he's German. They've got a prolific goal scorer. Press high up, don't give you time on the ball, and play some nice football themselves. Ebbsfleet, what's your thoughts on them being so far?
Yeah, really impressive. I agree with you. I think they're another team that came up and we kind of knew what we were going to expect from them. They're going to be exciting, really good on the ball, really good coach there, and Dennis Kutrieb got them playing some lovely stuff. And, when you've got a team full of experience that have played at this level, and you've got a player in Don Polian who always seems to score, you've got a good chance. And I think they've exceeded expectations as well. Given that we expected them to be competitive, but perhaps not adjust as well as they have as quickly. But yeah, really, really pleased. And I think if you ask their fans, 5th after 7 games, they'll be pleased. And I think the only problem for them is perhaps their inconsistency. Because yes, they've won 4. But they've also lost 3 and they've conceded a fair few goals as well. And I think it's just being a case of if they can find that little bit more of a balance to perhaps turn some of those defeats into draws. Because that could be the difference come the end.
I could see them putting a bit of a run. I think they are due to have a really good run. They're a side for me that I think I might have predicted them a bit low. I put them 12th, I believe. And I say this full on that I generally think that they have the capabilities to actually be in the playoffs come the end of the season. What's your thoughts on that? Do you see them maintaining this position or improving, or could you see them being a side that start well, like the majority of sides I are up there, and then they just over time will start to fall down into those mid-table positions?
I think if you said to their fans that there's a chance they could improve on where they are now and finish in the top 4 in their first season back, I think they'll snap your hand off at that. Dennis Kutrieb is a really good manager, done really well in England since coming over from Germany, and he is a good coach, gets his team playing some lovely stuff, and they've got lots of experience in their side. Out of all the teams that have come up, they've got players that have been there, done it, played in this level before, been successful in this level before, even played in the Football League. So they will certainly feel that they can. I think they'll probably be in and around it. I think they've got good quality. I put them mid-table, I think, in my predictions. And I'd still be inclined to say that's where roughly I think they'll finish. But yeah, if they continue the way that they have started, then they'll be confident that they can be in and around it at the end. And that's the one thing that I think could work in their favour is they've got a goal scorer. I think there's a lot of teams up there that perhaps don't have that prolific forward, but they have. Dominic Power, I think it's got 6 goals already in 6 games. So yeah, if any team with a player of that quality up front, you've got a chance.
Yeah, you certainly have. The next team then, of course, it's my team, Halifax Town, currently in 6th place at the moment. We've been defeated once all season. We've won 3. And I think all three games that we've actually won, we've been the underdogs in. And the games that we've actually struggled in have been those games where you'd say we probably should win and would be the favourites. But, forgetting all about that, forgetting about the quality in the opposition and the mix in opposition, we're unbeaten in 5. We've had 1 defeat all season and we're currently in 6th place. What's your overview been of Halifax so far?
Yeah, well, I think if you'd have asked me at the start how I expected them to play and do, I would have expected them to struggle against the lesser teams. But equally, I would have expected them to do better against the better teams, if that makes sense. I think Chris Millington's a manager who, we saw at the back end of last season that they perhaps weren't the most attractive side on the eye. They've got some good players, but they're well drilled, they're organised. You will know better than anyone as a fan yourself. Perhaps at times the fans want them to be a little bit more attacking and a little bit more open, but they're really well drilled, they're organised. Only conceded 5 goals this season, and that's having lost Jesse Deborah from last year. And that's what I would have expected from Halifax. Fairly compact. I'm eager to see how the 2 wide men do this season, Cook and Capello. I was really impressed with them last season. And I think if they can continue to improve, then they can be in and around it. And I'm disappointed I didn't back them to be higher, because genuinely after the FA Trophy final, and seeing what they were trying to build there, before they lost the players that they had, I was actually going to put them to be in and around the spot for the title. I thought the likes of Senior and Deborah at the back, I thought they were really, really good. Spence in midfield to come back. So I was going to put them in and around the top spots, and I didn't because they lost those players. But Chris Millington said that he's got a lower budget and it's had to be perhaps a bit more cute in the way that he's added players. But the players he's added so far have come in and done really well. And I think you'll be pleased with 6th so far.
Yeah, I would. But I think as a Halifax fan, we always look at ways we can improve. We could be top of the league and we'd still be looking at ways to improve. And the icing on the cake would be a prolific. I like Harker and I think he's a good striker, but I just can't see him being the man that's going to get you 20 goals a season, which is what you need if you want him to be properly up there. I think if you've, we've talked about how Halifax are really well drilled, they're difficult to score against. Obviously, they've got Sam Johnson in goal, really good goalkeeper for this level, and they've got a decent back 5. Real big fan of Tyler Golden. I think he's a really good player. So when they're difficult to score against, if you've got someone at the other end of the pitch that can get you 15, 20 goals a season, which I would agree in that I say that I don't think Halifax have that. If they did, I think they'd be a shoo-in for the playoffs. If you're difficult to score against and you can score yourself, then you've always got a chance. Yeah, and the problem is the fact that I think we as it's known, we do have quite a low budget, but it would be just like us to probably end up dropping points to Southend and Dorking and then getting a result against the likes of Chesterfield and Barnet because of the way that we play. And unlike last season, it feels like we're going to be better away from home this season because we'll be the underdogs. When we kind of prefer it when we're the side that we don't have to keep all the ball. We allow the opposition to have and we play them on the counter because we're so well organised, and we just need to hope that we can build on that and get those results and hopefully find a way to break down the likes of your Southends who will come, your Dorkings, these games that you should be winning at home.
I'd have more confidence in Halifax going and beating Chesterfield than I would them going and beating Maidenhead. Because I think I think they struggle when you have to break teams down. They've been really good so far.
So the top 4 then now, Hartlepool United, another side that have come down, have actually done well. I expected them to actually do that because they know this division from the back of the hand. They recruited very well. Kia Saruwe has been on fire for them. He's the type of striker that we're probably missing at the moment, Halifax. We need him back. But I think Hartlepool, they've had a very, very good start. The problem they may have now is, of course, Dodd's been out injured, and, of course, Mancini as well out injured, and it's looking like they're going to be out for the whole season as well for them. Do you see that having a major impact on their position this season?
I think it will hamper them. I was really impressed with Mancini. I thought he was, coming as a fairly unknown quantity. I don't think many were backing him to have a really, really good season. But he's been so good for them so far. And even though Mane Dizarivwe got Player of the Month, I actually think probably Mancini's been the pick of the players for them in the opening month. Certainly when I watched him on the telly, I think it was against Fylde, I thought he absolutely ran the show. Yeah. And to lose a player of that quality is disappointing. But, John Askey's a manager that he puts together winning teams. They'll be difficult to play against. And, they've still got quality in the middle. I think that I think they'll be more than good enough for a playoff spot. I expected them to be in and around the playoffs come the start. And even though they've lost some good players, I still expect them to be in and around it at the end.
Solihull then, probably one of the biggest surprises. I think aside a lot of us said they're going to struggle this season. Andy Wing, we said, I think maybe you didn't, but I know a lot of people have said unexperienced manager, never managed at this level, relying on a manager that's come from 2 leagues below. They've lost Dallas. They lost, of course, Barnett last season, Barnett who went to Wrexham. Howe's left the club. They lost a midfielder as well, but the name's gone out of my head. And, of course, Sabara as well, out at the moment. But they've proved us wrong, and the recruitment's been done very well so far, hasn't it? And the likes of Kelly's really stepped up now, and he's producing those goals for them, which they need. Third place, do you think that's a bit fortunate to be in that position, or do you think that's where they could be come the end of the season?
I don't think it's fortunate. I think they play really well, and they deserve to be third. As I say, I think that they're the only team in the league not to have lost so far, and across actually the 3 National League divisions, they're the only team. They're one of only 2 teams out of the 3 National Leagues yet to lose. So they absolutely deserve to be in third. Whether or not it's above where they will be at the end, if they finish in third, then I think it would certainly be higher than where I expected them to be. I actually put them to go down. I think
you weren't the only one there. Let's put it this way.
I think just because they'd lost so many good players. They lost Ryan Boot, really experienced goalkeeper that knows the National League, and they put a lot of trust in a young goalkeeper in Tommy Simpkin, but he's impressed. They've lost lots of experience out the back line. Obviously, lost Callum Howe and Gudger, they've brought in players that perhaps were unsure. Obviously, they brought in Richard Stearman that we do know a lot about, but equally they've brought in the likes of Cade Craig. That's done well after his release from Shrewsbury. Andy Wing, a really good manager, did really well at Banbury. And he looks like he's grasped his opportunity really well in stepping up. And I think the one thing that was key for them and that's allowed them to have a good start is, yes, they've lost some good players, but they have actually kept together a core of players that have done really well for Solihull before. The likes of your Osborns, your Sabaras, Kelly, who I think, as you said, he's thriving, I think, as the main man up front. And he's a fantastic talent. And I don't think they'll be third come the end. And I think if you ask Solihull fans, I don't think they'll expect to be third come the end. But it's been a good start, and they absolutely deserve to be where they are.
Of course, Chesterfield, then, in second place at the moment on goal difference. The pressure's on them, isn't it? Because we've lost Wrexham and we've lost Notts County. Most people had them as the title favourites. If you didn't, I think it's very hard to justify why you wouldn't have them as the title favourites with the money that they've spent. The only other side at the start of the season that I could really have a point across to why they wouldn't, who would compete with them on paper would be Oldham. And although it's very early, I can't see Oldham being that side that's going to take them all the way this season. I think they've done what they've needed to do. They've had 1 defeat, 1 draw, and 5 wins. They've had a very good start to the season, I think. And like I've said, the pressure's on them. They're expecting to win every single game. And you're not going to do that, are you, every single week? You're going to have those off weeks. So for me, I think they've had a very good start considering the pressure's on them. There's been no major concerns. They look good as a side. I'd still have them as title favourites come the end of the season. What's your take being on them?
I'd agree. I think, I had them to win the league at the start, and I'd still have them to win the league come the end. Lots of quality, and it's shown. Tom Naylor, obviously come in from the Football League, worked under Paul Cook before. He's done well at the base of midfield. It was actually a position I didn't think they needed to improve. They had their likes of Ollie Banks, Mike Jones, who impressed at the back end of last season, but they brought in real quality to improve there. The only reason why I think Chesterfield may potentially not win the league is their defence. And I think Chesterfield fans would probably agree there in that for as good as they are going forward, the likes of Colclough and Mandeville creating chances for Will Grigg, they're always going to scored the most goals in the league. Defensively, that I don't think they're good enough. I look at their left back options, Horton, and are they good enough really to?
Was it Maguire or was it Horton who went on loan to Donny?
I think it was Maguire went to Crawley on loan. Obviously, Brandon Horton signed from Doncaster last summer, I think that's the one area which I think Chesterfield will have a slight bit of concern. Obviously, they've got good defenders, the likes of Ashley Palmer, Jamie Grimes, both of which have captained their teams to promotion from this league. Ashley Palmer with Stockport and Jamie Grimes as well. But I think if they are going to win it, and I think it'll be quite a close run thing. I think Barnet will be there or thereabouts, Hartlepool, Woking. If they are going to potentially go and win the league, then I think they need to improve at the back.
The two no-nonsense centre Palmer, Grimes. They're not your attractive, proper, new. They're basically old-fashioned centre-halves, industrial centre-halves, aren't they? That'll do a job, but for a side that's wanting to play really attractive football, Palmer, Grimes, for me, they're not those type of centre-halves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there is value in having, for all the good attacking sides, you still need your no-nonsense players that are going to get your foot in. I look at, for example, Jamie Grimes obviously was at Cheltenham. Cheltenham won the division, one of the best teams that's ever played in the National League. Really good going forward, but equally they had 2 centre-halves in Aaron Downs and Danny Parslow, who were rock solid, no nonsense, and just head it, kick it. And I think there is still a lot of value in that. But I would agree that they're perhaps not the best of players on the floor. And if that's what Paul Cook wants, then he perhaps needs to go and get another centre half in the remaining. He's got loads of time up until February to go and get one. But I think as long as they've got Tom Naylor holding the fort in midfield, then having players like the Palmer and Grimes that can be no nonsense and solid is really useful.
So, of course, top of the league at the moment, a side that did very well last season and have kept the majority of the squad together and kind of just added to it with more depth, and that is Barnet. They look very good to watch, which I will say. It doesn't feel like they're out of their depth at the top of the league, like they're not expected to be there. They look like they're holding their own there at the moment. They've played some quite good teams as well, likes of Hartlepool they've played, Woking as well. Bromley, I also believe they've played this season as well. Do you see them being a side that really can push Chesterfield come the end of the season from what you've seen so far?
They certainly can. And I think that's one of the areas where I didn't think Barnet would be that good defensively. I still have my concerns, but they look to have sorted some of that. They certainly haven't conceded as many as Chesterfield so far. I think Adi Oluwu coming in from Chelmsford has been a fantastic signing. He's been probably Barnet's best player so far for them, and he's done well at the heart of defence. And again, another team that have got a striker up front that scores goals. Nicky Kabamba, and if you've got someone like him in your side, he'll probably get you in the region of 20 goals this season. And if you've got that, you've always got a chance. And I think one thing that Dean Brennan's done really well is he knew that they were close last season. They only just lost in the playoffs, and he resisted the urge to go out and sign loads of players. Yes, they've brought in a fair few, but not loads of players. They've brought in one or two in key areas and strengthened their bench. I think they will certainly be in and around it come the end. I think I had them in the playoffs, and they would expect to be in and around the playoffs for the squad that they've assembled.
Joe, thank you very much for coming on tonight, just speaking to me about the National League and the start to the season. As always, it's been very, very unpredictable. Of course, Barnet top of the league at the summit at the moment. And like we've mentioned, a lot of sides that have been very underwhelming. But I'm sure we'll do this again whenever you're next free, when we've played probably another 7 or 8 games. We'll see where the sides are at. I'm sure it'll be a totally different story by that point. But thanks for joining me, Joe.
Yeah, no worries. As you say, very unpredictable. And no doubt when we look back later in the season, it may be completely different. But really good catching up again.
Be good to see Torquay as well back in the National League come this time next year. But yeah, please remember to like and subscribe. Check out our sponsors in the link in the description, and we will see you next time.